You know, it's interesting to see how some games just have significantly more longevity than other stuff. And maybe it's just because I operate and have operated within the DR fandom, and I'm not far enough into it, like the Chaos Head fandom, if that exists, or anything else, or whatever, and I don't frequent those forums of social media enough to have a strong idea of how fervent and how frequent fandoms appear. But I still kind of doubt it, comparatively speaking. Like, DR, probably has Discords and Substacks and whatever dedicated to this day. They have infinite fanfictions, tons of independent projects surrounding it, or at the very least directly inspired by it. People who still mainly engage with the internet on the basis of being in that fandom. And, I mean, like, for instance, Rain Code is pretty much dead on arrival. Maybe some people played it. Nobody has mentioned it ever since. It doesn't have any staying power at all. DR just has, like, the autistic influence that latches on to its victims for the rest of their god-awful lives. And this puts me in an awkward place, because like most Gen Z internet brain-dead twink losers, there are like two types, okay? There's like the Twitter brain rot type, like myself, cynical about everything, communicates exclusively through 6 layers of sarcasm all the time, and is the mortal enemy of all things cringe. And then there's the opposite type. Way too genuine, way too straightforward, way too serious, way too sentimental, don't interpret irony from everything, and fully embrace cringe in a straightforward fashion. And you see, like, I'm like Dante, right? I'm the son of an angel and a demon. I have the influence of the autism in my veins, but I'm also a cynical Twitter goblin and a natural enemy of the cringe. And this means that I obsess over Danganronpa in an autistic fashion, but I have a completely different relationship with the series than basically every other autistic cringe lord who has made it their primary online personality trait. Due to just the sheer time lapse since V3 came out, and mechanical and cultural changes in social media over that time period, there just isn't the same sense of dialogue that there used to be with the series, which is obvious and understandable. No one would expect anything different, but the people who still discuss the series to this day are mostly people who have already formed their own identifiable circles and communities, and sometimes interlap. And it's difficult for me to operate in those spaces since I'm technically a totally different kind of person, and I have such a completely different outlook on consuming and interpreting all media. I would love to have serious analytical discussions about basically any aspect of the series, even the parts I would otherwise not talk about frequently in my own work, like the shitty DR3 anime I don't care about or stuff like that. But when the DR series was coming out still, I didn't really have the same analytical grasp on it that I have today. Not when 1 or 2 came out, but at the very least, when it was new, there wasn't an established meta of how everyone talked about it yet. I could provide analysis in videos or in blog channels or whatever that was completely different from the things that other people were saying, what other people had to offer. And all the bystanders that were just hanging around it because it was a fresh game that just came out would go along with it and say, oh, that's interesting, I never thought of that before. But V3 is by far and away where the issue is clearest to me. Like, the ending in V3 recontextualizes the entire game. It is vital to have seen the ending, to have a real analytical talk about any element in the whole thing. However, because the series ended very obviously, there was never any even slight hint that there was going to be another game. Clearly they were saying this is the bookend. The majority of foot traffic around the series just stopped as soon as people finished the game. The number of people talking about the game, even after immediately finishing it, just dropped like a rock. So once the more casual crowds came and went, V3 has so much shit in it that has never really been discussed by large groups of people or by the fandom at large, because the idea of new ways of analyzing the series pretty much died once people finished their first playthrough of that, and it was clear to everyone that the series was over, and, you know, you can't have a fandom based on something that's over. I mean, you can, but it's gonna have a lot less eyeballs. And this is probably one of the bigger mistakes in the plans of, I guess, Kodaka and the developers and whatever, because they clearly wanted the ending of V3 to be talked about to a similarly autistic degree that the fandom has talked about everything else up to this point, everything in DR2 or whatever. They wanted people to replay the game with that context, to analyze and make their own discoveries, and just talk about it for fucking, like, the next 2 years or so. But once the impetus to be in the fandom dies off, the discussions largely leave with it. Now, sure, you know, people here and there, they finish, like, a Let's Play or a stream of it, they make some small video essay maybe on what they think of the ending by itself, just because it's a trendy topic, a controversial topic to talk about. But there wasn't the same level of autism towards analyzing every part of it under all contexts like there was with DR2. Now, personally, I usually want to make at least an occasional Danganronpa video because I'm so aware that there is still a lot to talk about in it that has not been discussed yet, and even the things that I've already discussed in my own friend groups or on my channel that most people still don't know about, that people are missing a lot of interesting shit waiting to be recognized, but it only gets harder and harder as time passes to, one, identify audience members, and two, justify continuing to make analytical content for a game series that will only ever have less and less cultural relevance as time proceeds. Like, there's an unspoken way in which people tend to categorize pieces of media in their heads, I think. Some media seems, like, chic and refined, and you can unearth some largely obscure thing 20 years later and talk about it because it feels like it can be seen as a timeless classic, and all you have to do is introduce it to people and explain why it's a classic. Some media is just a current trend and is extremely culturally relevant only so long as the trend continues, and then it drops in relevancy after they move on to the next trend. Some stuff is like media that everyone knows about, but no one really tried, no one really thought hard enough about it until some guy made a video essay explaining why it's slept on or why it has things that you didn't even remember or realize. So, like, retrospectives on old shows that everyone watched, I guess, when they were a kid or something, but now with adult recontextualization, introducing this idea that it's actually even better than you thought it would be, etc. And it's hard to sell that interpretation of DR to people. I can't make people think of DR as like a series that's a timeless classic with some sort of infinite potential to be appreciated, like the fucking Mona Lisa or something. No one is gonna think of DR like some sophisticated fucking art piece, you know? I can't even sell it as a series that has good stuff that people have overlooked, because the game wasn't overlooked. You know, it's, everyone has heard the name, at least, the audience, it was a trend. It was a trend, and it was only consumed as a trend. So, just on an emotional level, it feels like DR can only be thought of as a trend, and since nothing else has effectively taken its place, to maintain the trend, it's kind of mostly dead to new schools of thought and discussion. So, like, how can I possibly intrigue people to think of DR as something with a lot that's still left to offer and talk about if they don't see it as culturally or intellectually significant? Let's see, really quick, to draft like a visual, okay? These are the characters I've already done videos on. This is my context of what I think when I'm, like, working on shit. Some of them, like Oma or Akane, I've done 2 videos on. I could still talk about some of these characters if I had anything particularly insightful to say about them that I didn't already say in the video I made, etc. Then I have characters I've already written video scripts for, but I've left them on the shelf. I just haven't gotten around to editing them and making them into actual videos, whatever. Next, the characters that I don't currently have a lot to add to, i.e. characters that I don't feel like I can contribute to analytical discussion on, possibly because I think they're already understood enough by the fandom, or because their appeal, in my opinion, is very abstract and difficult to put into words, i.e. vibes and comedy and stuff. Then I have characters that I do have a breadth of analytical content to unpack that could maybe suffice into a workable video that I'm already mostly proficient in, but either other people have already made their own videos on these topics, or I just talked with friends about them in private so much that I forget that I haven't actually made videos on my channel. And long story short, they're just not very motivated because they don't feel like fresh observations to me or interesting enough compared to the stuff that I've already talked about that people still don't know about. Then there's like Komaru, I guess, who fits into the I like her for purely vibes and comedy-based reasons that I can't really analytically explain. Every other character on this list is sitting in a state of limbo where they could theoretically make for an interesting video. I would just have to analyze them and put more work into them to find the words to say something interesting about them or make more interesting observations about them. Some of them, like, say, Gonta or Teru, I've previously tried to make videos about, just not because I was motivated to, but just draw them out of a hat. I was like, what if I made a video on this asshole? And I put some work into it, and I didn't come up with any ideas that seemed very interesting to me. So, at the very least, I didn't find stuff that was interesting enough to meet my own personal standards of interestingness to justify a video. Other characters, even ones I like, such as like Hiyoko or Mahiru, I've just never really put that much time into studying them, studying the textual evidence, studying the cultural influences and media influences that informed their character creation and what meta implications they were meant to represent, etc. I've just been lazy, relatively speaking, and maybe any of these characters I could find something interesting to say about them in the future. Although, like I said, then we always come back to the original problem of where's the audience, where's the impetus to discuss a dead fandom. Obviously, there are more things to make videos about than just individual character analysis. I kind of get annoyed when people act like that's the be-all and end-all of analysis, but characters in this series really embody a lot of the trope-based meta that the series is going for. I've made videos about related topics and other topics like chapter structures, Kotodama influences, meta-analysis in a broad sense, V3's recontextualization and the purpose of the game, etc. As with any arrogant, uptight video essay writer like myself, I find a sense of disappointment and frustration over time with the fact that I want to discuss the things that I know, but once the traffic to a video stops, it pretty much just lies dormant and there's no discussion that it propagates. So sometimes I try reaching out to others, like I'll reach out to certain content creators or streamers to see if they want to do some sort of collaboration, but I'm obviously complete nobody. I have no audience and thus no social standing, and like I said earlier, I don't really engage with these games and these genres and media as a whole in the same way that most of the fan base does, so I'm not really a part of their social circles. We have very different personalities. We're fundamentally different kinds of people, and also I'm cursed with the lack of basic social skills that all the other autistic people are, which is mostly just me coming up to someone and yelling at them on Twitter like, hey, you wanna do a collab, random stranger? Which is an inefficient scientific method. It's rough. It's a raw deal. In a way, like, deep down, I was kind of banking, emotionally speaking, I was kind of banking on Rain Code to extend the fandom, you know? I was kind of banking on it to be, like, good and reignite the same, or at least a similar analytical fervor that would make old or current analysis work relevant again. But instead, Raincode is a totally forgettable piece of shit, and all the DR adjacent stuff has been like hit or miss, or otherwise takes forever to get updated, and it's just not quite the same. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it just doesn't achieve all of the same things. Like, we've been waiting 3 years for the next fucking update to Your Turn to Die. The 2 particularly good DR fan projects that I've seen are both slow and laborious, like all fan projects are. And other games trying to fill the void are mostly questionable, like that shitty, Inescapable game. Even if stuff like, Kumatante or other smaller projects turn out to be good, I kind of doubt that it will or could inspire the same level of constant engagement. And even if it did, like, I think Your Turn to Die is great. I really enjoy it, but it's definitely not the same thing. It's not the same type of appeal. It's not the, like, well of analytical gold that you can make a million fucking videos about. It might be a strange comparison, but the only other game that gives me a similar vibe of, like the impulse to talk about it in an analytical way is fucking Honey Pop 1, which is an infinitely smaller in its audience base, but it has a similar level of autism amongst the most dedicated fans such as myself, and a similar well of opportunity for analytical content to emerge relative to size, at least. Or at least analytical discussions on fucking Discords. But I mean, I love Honey Pop 1, but it's such a smaller game, it can't even just a single entry of a DR mainline series, I've pretty much analyzed all there is to analyze in Honey Pop already, and made equivalent videos about it. There's, like, probably a bit more to talk about, but, like, there is a lot relative to the game's size and script, and what most people walk away with versus what there is to actually understand about it. But it's still not comparable to what people like me have lost by having nothing even remotely similar to DR to talk about in the same way. Also, it obviously has no cultural relevance either. Now, if I wanted to scratch my analytical itch, I have to wait for something new to come out that just has a huge depth of analytical material that isn't getting noticed by the general public, that has the sort of autistic audience that will engage with random videos made by nobodies. My last analytical video was me bitching about how much I hate biopics. My last analysis of a specific piece of media was other DRV3 stuff from over a year ago, like a year and a half ago. The last non-DR thing that I did analysis on was Honey Pop, surprise, surprise, and the last analytical thing that I felt inspired to make for a new product at all was, I think, Nope. I made a video on Jordan Peele's Nope, however many years ago that was. Now, retroactively thinking, I could have also made analytical videos on other solid, great stuff from the past 2 years. You know, there's stuff that warrants analysis and discussion. Stuff like Succession obviously warrants it, but there are better people than myself to discuss the important subtleties and the complexities and the grand designs at play. I could have done, like, Immortality, but I didn't feel inspired, etc. See, this is the thing about DR, is in the fact that it only appeals to autistic people, and I am a unique figure in that I'm an autistic person who hates cringe and hates anime, is that by the very nature of its writing style is that, one, I had a very unique voice in DR that other people didn't have, and versus, like, if I talk about some movie with a lot of analytical depth, like if I talk about fucking Anatomy of a Fall, sure, I could analyze it, but, like, so can a dozen other people that I know, etc. But also the thing about DR is that the very nature of its writing style It's a series based on the founding doctrine of cramming a bunch of anime tropes together that are not supposed to be together, and burning them alive, and then using out-of-the-box ideas to make something out of the melted flesh and ashes that you're left with. It's a series that is tailor-made to produce original ideas that are worth discussing. Whereas something like Immortality or any other good, well-written, deep piece of storytelling is, like, excellent and high quality and layered and whatnot, but ultimately probably telling the same sort of stories and expressing the same sort of values and using very similar methods of artistic expression that a lot of pieces of quality fiction throughout all of human history have already engaged with. DR is just very novel because it is built out of trying to... It is so meta in its concept and in its production, in that what it generates is specifically designed to be fucking different from all of the things that it's based off of. It fucking chimera deconstructs everything into some bizarre fucking thing that you can't use the same terminology to explain it in the way. For some reason in my head now I'm thinking of that line in like episode 2 of Shogun, where they're talking about how Toranaga sees them as bureaucrats and that he takes advantage of them by mocking their rules and regulations and flaunting their flaws in a play-acted sense. And that's how I think of DR, where it's like DR is based off of stealing a bunch of ideas and tropes and shittiness from very archetypal stories, and then reconstructing the basic design principles of those well understood archetypal stories to build something that is fundamentally different. And that's why there's so much room for discussion. And also just because the way it's written has a fucking infinite depth of ability to compare and contrast similar elements, because it's built up of symmetrical elements. The most recent stuff that I've seen as of me writing this that warrants narrative analysis or discussion of some kind is Baby Reindeer. Then, like, American Fiction, maybe Poor Things, etc., other stuff. Although plenty of people leap to pump out their video essays whenever, like, a Yorgos Lanthimos film drops. Fucking Anatomy of a Fall, whatever. All these things, while deep and complex and cool and everything, they just don't have that same boundary where they truly need some dorklit fucking loser like me to go in and explain what people are missing out on. The last piece of media that I felt truly 100% inspired to make an analytical video on explaining, because it was so fucking layered and subtle in its ideas and people were not fucking getting it, was The Third Murder by Koreeda, which came out in fucking 2018. The fact is, I've been using DR to scratch my analytical itch for a long time now, so I'm kind of going into like a withdrawal of that. I either need something new to be autistic about in a similar way, or I need the discussions to start up again with a fresh or at least more engaged audience. And it's difficult for me because the more experience I get every single year, the harder I am to be impressed with media, and the more and more complex the stories are that I can still find simplistic and boring and not worth talking or thinking about. And the harder it is it becomes to scratch the itch. Like, the autism is fucking boiling me alive, right? The threatening to overthrow and explode in some nightmare scenario autism-based catastrophe. And, I mean, like, jokes aside, but is it just me and my own short-sightedness? Do I just not understand how fucking Discord works enough, or how Reddit works enough, that I can find these active communities? Or are they just not making anime shit that scratches the itch anymore? Like, I guess we'll see. ReFantazio is going to come out this year. That's probably the closest thing in a long time that will hit upon something similar. But I feel like since, I guess, Persona 5 dropped however many years ago, both in games and in TV anime, there's not been something of the same cultural niche and impact that can fill, like, the same fucking void. The last anime that I watched with any interest was probably Odd Taxi, which was, I think, like, 4 years ago? I'm vaguely aware of some shit, of some, like, anime TV shit that comes out, the current trend for a few weeks, and then it disappears, like Frieren or Spy Family or whatever. But those trend-based animes are obviously not what I'm referring to. Like, I'm thinking, like, when the fuck is the next Kill La Kill or Paranoia Agent? When's the next K-On! Or Psychopaths or Shiki? When is the next some big shit gonna have some real staying power? Other than just the new trendy thing that gets renewed for more seasons. Where is the depth? I'm not into the autism in which people get emotional over, like, the most half-assed, trite, imaginable plot lines and talk about how much they stan some fucking character they just met because they're a generic caricature of attractiveness. I want the autism that's made for people that are obsessed with trains. Anyways, right, yeah. Rambly video without a very clear message. That's mostly what I wanted to talk about. That's about it. See ya.